Today I'm reacting to your wrestling hot takes. We do these videos once a week, so if you want to submit your hot takes for next week's video, make sure that you're following me on X. I ask for your hot takes on there every Thursday. Just check the link down below. It's in the description. Hey, as always, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Ring that bell for notifications. If you're a wrestling fan, you're going to fall in love with this YouTube channel because we upload daily wrestling content. Also, check out patreon.com/SantiZap. There's some extra wrestling content that I post on there that you will never see here on YouTube, like my Raw reviews and SmackDown reviews. So if you want even more content, go check out patreon.com/SantiZap. All right, say it with me. Let's read some stupid shit. Cody Rhodes buries talent and no one comes out looking good after losing to him. Okay, but like, to be fair, who has he feuded with? Let's like go through the list of proper Cody Rhodes feuds since he's been back in the WWE. So he's feuded with Seth Rollins, and Seth Rollins came out the back end of that feud and became World Heavyweight Champion. So I think you're wrong there. Then Brock Lesnar, do we really need Brock Lesnar to look good and be elevated? And then there was Roman Reigns, who ended up beating him. So I don't know if I necessarily buy this narrative. Maybe back in AEW, but in the WWE, I just don't think that he's had enough meaningful feuds where we can properly make a statement like this. I guess the Judgment Day didn't necessarily come out looking amazing after feuding with main event Jay and Cody Rhodes for the tag titles. Maybe? But I don't know. I just don't think that we have enough evidence to make a claim like this. Vince McMahon's booking was better than Triple H's now. More change and less predictability. So Mako Mac, I have to emphatically disagree. In all of the years that I've watched professional wrestling, I think that this is the best booked version of the WWE that I've ever watched over the past 22 years of watching wrestling. Now, you say that the Vince McMahon era was less predictable, and people use predictability as a measure of a program being bad. And I don't necessarily think that that's the case. I think being predictable is okay in many instances. For example, if I were to ask you 2 + 2, you're gonna predict that it's 4. Sometimes it just makes sense to make certain outcomes happen because they're logical. And sure, when they're logical, it means that they're predictable, but logic sometimes is good. Making wild decisions that don't make sense for the sake of being unpredictable can sometimes lead to absolutely stupid decisions. I point to Jimmy Uso unpredictably turning on Jay Uso at SummerSlam. It looked like Vince McMahon booked that. I'm not saying that he did, but that was an unpredictable decision that was made that I think objectively made SummerSlam much worse. So sometimes it's okay to be predictable, folks. It sometimes leads to good television. Bobby Roode is the most upsetting use of a former NXT champion on the main roster. He could have been such a bigger name if the WWE booked him correctly. So I do agree that they could have done so much more with Bobby Roode. Bobby Roode was a fantastic. I was part of the Bobby Roode movement during the NXT Black and Gold era. Bobby Roode was fantastic, and he absolutely should have accomplished more on the main roster. I'm with you. Where you lose me is when you say that it's the most upsetting use of a former NXT champion when Karrion Kross was jobbed out to Jeff Hardy with a roll-up while he was the NXT champion, and then was made to wear gimp wear and made to be a homoerotic gladiator. That's a pretty brutal use of a former NXT champion. I think that throne goes to poor Karrion Kross. The Seth Rollins CM Punk feud / buildup is going to have a similar feel to that of Rock versus Cena. Nah, I don't think so. I think Rock versus Cena is such a unique thing where it had an entire year to build up. I don't think that Seth Rollins and CM Punk necessarily need something like that. And like, the hate between Seth Rollins and CM Punk is so personal, while the disdain between The Rock and Cena is purely professional, right? The problem was Cena says that The Rock isn't there enough. That was basically the precipice of the Rock Cena feud, while Seth Rollins versus CM Punk is just because they absolutely detest each other. I don't think that it's gonna be like that. If anything, it's got closer to shades of Matt Hardy versus Edge. Not that level of like reality, but I think it's closer to that than it is to Rock versus Cena. If built correctly and based on ratings, Punk versus Rollins for the World Heavyweight Championship should main event night 2 of WrestleMania instead of Cody versus Roman. Homie, I am with you 100%. Right now, like on paper, Cody versus Roman, sure, night 2. But we're presuming that they're gonna do a good enough feud to justify putting them on night 2, because the star power is definitely there. However, if they don't book that correctly, if the story just doesn't hit as hard as Punk versus Rollins, then I think they should put that night 1 and put Seth Rollins versus CM Punk at night 2. I think you can absolutely justify that, because you do have the star power and you have the prize, a world heavyweight championship, and you have a feud that people have been clamoring for the better part of a decade. I think you can absolutely do this. If Cody and Roman is not booked properly, if they do not build enough hype, and it's gonna be hard to build up hype for it because we've seen it before, then don't be surprised if the fans would prefer to have Punk versus Rollins at night 2 and have that be the true main event of WrestleMania. Fellas, cold turkey may be good on a sandwich, but as a strategy to stop a bad habit, it might not necessarily be the best. Because it doesn't necessarily take some Papa Shango voodoo-like magic to get rid of a bad habit. Sometimes you just need to get rid of the bad in the habit. And that's where the sponsor of today's video comes in, Fume. Fume is an innovative, award-winning, and frankly, really aesthetically pleasing flavored air device that does just that. They remove the bad from the habit. Instead of this being electronic, it's actually all natural and requires no charging. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air, and I literally mean that. It's just air. There's no haze or any sort of clouds. And for me, fellas, most importantly, instead of using harmful chemicals, Fume uses all natural flavors. Look, you're smart. You get it. What I'm trying to say is that instead of bad, Fume is good. It allows you to enjoy the not bad part of your habit in a guilt-free, natural way. Your Fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers something to do, which is helpful for de-stressing when you're trying to break a bad habit. I personally tested 7 different flavors, and I gotta say that my favorite by far is crisp mint. It just gives me a good feeling of like cooled and refreshed. I do have to admit I was a little bit skeptical about how strong flavored air is, but it is shockingly flavorful. And that adjustable airflow dial is what helps you determine how much of that flavor you want to bring in. Stopping is something that we've all put off because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable, and even fun. Fume has already served over 150,000 customers with thousands of success stories, and there's no reason why that next success story can't be you. So join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com/MrSantizap or use the QR code and use code MrSantizap to get 10% off of your Journey Pack today. You can also upgrade your Journey Pack to the Solano to enjoy that premium walnut barrel and onyx black coated mouthpiece that has a smoother finish and still get 10% off. Again, that's tryfume.com and use code MrSantizap to get that additional 10% off today. Again, thank you to Fume for sponsoring today's video, and let's get back to it. Randy Orton will dethrone Roman at the Royal Rumble, making it Cody versus Randy at Mania, Clash of Legacies. I'm entertaining this idea because a lot of people talk about Cody's story and him finishing the story, but I don't think that Cody's story necessarily has to involve Roman Reigns. It never did at the beginning. It just happened that at one point or another he had to overcome Roman Reigns, but his story is to bring the WWE Championship legacy to the Rhodes family. Does that necessarily have to involve Roman Reigns? I don't know, you tell me. I think a lot of people would like that because Roman Reigns is like the final boss, but I think that there's an interesting narrative to say that it's Randy instead of Roman Reigns, that it is a clash of legacies, that it is the Ortons that are handing over the torch to the Rhodes. I think that that's a really interesting narrative. So yeah, maybe like expand your brain beyond just like being having blinders on to Cody's quote story having to end with Roman Reigns. I don't think that it absolutely has to end with Roman Reigns. I would just prefer that it did. CM Punk will win the Royal Rumble and challenge Roman Reigns instead of Seth Rollins. Sorry, dude, that just doesn't make sense right now. That would be doing the unpredictable, like how we talked about earlier. Just doing something that we don't predict for the sake of being unpredictable doesn't necessarily lend to better storytelling and to better television. And I think that this is a perfect case of that. Yes, it would be more unpredictable for Punk to go after Roman because we're expecting him to go after Rollins after everything that's been going on. But the fact of the matter is that the best story ready to go on our plate that we all are clamoring for, that we want to see, is Punk versus Rollins. So why try to be unpredictable and not do the thing that just makes sense? Like I said, sometimes it's just easier to just do 2 + 2 = 4 and not overcomplicate things. Punk versus Rollins is the feud that we need if Punk wins at the Royal Rumble. Seth Rollins ends up tagging with CM Punk in the next 365 days, and they win the belts. And folks, another example of being unpredictable does not lend to better storytelling and better television. I don't think that this happens. I don't think it makes sense for it to happen. And in today's landscape of WWE, where WWE actually allows wrestlers to reference things that have happened in the past to shape the characters' motivations of today, why would this ever happen? Like, think about how much Rollins and Cody Rhodes still dislike each other. They don't want to ever partner with one another. They sometimes are willing to put their differences aside, but there's still animosity there. They would never be World Tag Team Champions. And I think you can make that case not just double, not triple, but quadruple, that CM Punk versus Seth Rollins hate each other enough that they would never, ever become pals and become tag team champions. NXT has been on fire in 2023, way better than Raw and SmackDown this year. I think that it's been the most consistently good show because there hasn't been this lull. Like, NXT from the start of 2023 right to the end was very good. However, Raw and SmackDown were also fantastic, but there was that middle in the summer where we all believe strongly that Vince McMahon took over. This is where the meme on our podcast of "I'm convinced it's Vince" was born, because there was just such bad television in the summer, and it started with that terrible Raw after Mania, and it seeped into SmackDown as well. But then the latter half of the year, it's truly recovered. So in terms of consistency, I'll agree with you. I think NXT was the best show of 2023. The creeds don't feel interesting enough for me. Sure, the wrestling is great, don't get me wrong, but I need more out of them. Also, change their finisher. It's not good. Nah, come on. I like the finisher. I will say I like the finisher, but I do agree with the rest of the sentiment of your message here. I love the creeds. People think that I just hate them for the sake of hating them, but I was the biggest cheerleader of the creeds when the creeds were called up to the main roster. Why? Here's why. Because they are fantastic wrestlers, as you mentioned here. They are so good. The things that Julius Creed can do are things that, to me, scream that guy is going to be a WWE World Champion in the future. They are incredible in the ring. The thing is that in NXT, they didn't just win us over with their in-ring work. They won us over with the great stories that they were telling, their backstage shenanigans, their vignettes, their mic work, their storytelling. That's how they ultimately won us over and endeared us to them. They skipped that spot on the main roster. They just went straight to they're good wrestlers, therefore a main event, right? And because they've skipped that step, a lot of people are starting to kind of turn on the creeds, kind of including myself, because I know what they're capable of in terms of from character work, and they have not been doing that in any way, shape, or form on Raw. They started at the beginning, but they've completely skipped the part that made the creeds lovable and went right to sending them to the moon. It would be interesting to see WWE on TNT. If that happens, AEW may not last on TNT and TBS. So let me translate this to my non-American friends, because I'm not American either, but WWE is in the middle of discussions of selling the rights of Monday Night Raw to different networks, one of those networks being Warner Brothers Discovery, and it seems like they might be a front runner to win Monday Night Raw starting next year. Here's the thing, Warner Brothers Discovery also has TNT, TBS, and those are the networks where traditionally AEW airs. So Warner Brothers Discovery has already paid for AEW. Now imagine a world where they also pay for the WWE. I don't don't think that it's crazy to think that they would dump AEW because they've already made this large investment into the WWE, or maybe just shove AEW onto a more obscure network that's part of like their laundry list, like Discovery perhaps, or Sci-Fi. I think Sci-Fi's part of it. I don't know. Anyways, your thought of AEW not lasting on TNT and TBS if they sign WWE is correct. Like, they wouldn't cannibalize their own audience on the same network. They would just, that's just bad booking from a television point of view. You just don't put those two things competing against one another. It just doesn't make any sense. Plus, it would just be a weird Warner Brothers Discovery Christmas party to have WWE and AEW execs there. I'm pretty sure that if WWE does go with Warner Brothers Discovery, that logically they would most likely not renew with AEW. And that sucks, and we shouldn't celebrate AEW losing a TV deal. I see people celebrating that, and you got to realize that like that could lead to wrestlers losing their jobs. That could lead to wrestlers not having multiple options in terms of where they can go. That could lead to wrestlers making less money. Like, we should want this competition, right? We don't want WWE getting stale because their competition is dead. We want WWE to push forward and innovate because AEW is nipping at their heels. So if this does happen, fingers crossed, I hope AEW finds another home soon. John Cena is significantly better in the ring than people give him credit for, especially later in his career. He carried Great Khali through a good match even earlier on in his career. Yeah, people have this moniker that Cena can't wrestle, and even one of the chants was, "You can't wrestle." Don't get me wrong, Cena is not Daniel Bryan, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio. He's not doing these amazing high flyer or technical wrestling brilliance moves. That's just not who John Cena is. But he's a great professional wrestler, but maybe not a great technician. I think that's the best way to put it. He's a great professional wrestler because at the end of the day, the number one job of the professional wrestler is to get the crowd involved and get the crowd invested in the result. And there was arguably no one better at that than John Cena. But when we talk about the physicality of the things that happen in the ring, you're right. Cena got way better on later in his career. And I think it's because they allowed him to expand his moveset beyond the 5 moves of doom. During that like 2014 era on, Cena became a lot more versatile, and he was having much better matches against the likes of like Kevin Owens, AJ Styles, Seth Rollins. And people always say, oh, well, like he was carried by those guys. Name me a better AJ Styles match, okay? Because he's had matches with Finn Balor, he's had matches with Nakamura, and still has not been able to replicate the magic of his trilogy with Cena. It takes 2 to dance, folks, and part of that duo is Cena. You have to give him credit where credit is due sometimes. I don't think that he's the greatest technical wrestler ever, but he's a good professional wrestler. LA Knight is on the verge of irrelevance. If WWE doesn't do something with him soon, he could be the next Karrion Kross. Well, how the turntables. Things have really flipped upside down for LA Knight. He's no longer the top shiny toy of WWE with the return of CM Punk and the return of Randy Orton, and now we have the return of AJ Styles. So the main event scene is getting real crowded real quick. I do think that they're going to be pushing LA Knight out of the title picture, but not out of the main event scene. I think that he's likely going to be feuding with a heel AJ Styles, which like that's a really great spot to be in, don't get me wrong, but I think a lot of people just have title in mind for LA Knight and not thinking of the bigger picture of just having him in the main event scene is a win. Like, think about where he was last year at this point. Being in the main event scene is a huge win for LA Knight's career at this point. Matt Cardona showed that doing a run in the indies can always be a good thing. Not just Matt Cardona, there's a lot of guys that left WWE and increased their stock while being outside of the WWE. I think you mentioned a great example, Matt Cardona, because now a lot of people are clamoring for him to come back to the WWE. But I would say that the most successful example may be Drew McIntyre, who left as a genuine, just absolute joke when he was in the WWE as part of 3MB, went to the indies, became Drew Galloway, became an absolute badass, grew some chest hair, came back, and now is one of the top stars in the WWE. So yes, sometimes you should just step away from the WWE, master your craft somewhere else, master your character work, come back and try it again. At this rate, we're going to be seeing CM Punk wrestle a match in WWE before Jade Cargill. That would have been unimaginable only a few weeks ago. It's crazy how she went from getting the superstar treatment, appearing in backstage segments with Charlotte, to completely disappearing from TV. But we're still talking about her, and the reason we're still talking about her is because of that superstar treatment that they gave her. Look, I think it's good that they gave her the superstar treatment because it just shines the light to other AEW stars that might want to make the jump that WWE is going to treat you good. WWE is going to make a star out of you. And I think if they are able to do that with Jade Cargill, some other talent like the MJFs of the world are going to feel a little bit more comfortable about making the jump. Is it possible that CM Punk is going to have a match before Cargill? I think it's guaranteed at this point. He has a match scheduled at Madison Square Garden before the end of the year in a house show. So yes, however, CM Punk is not a raw talent. CM Punk does not need to be trained up to the ways of the WWE. CM Punk is one of the best to ever do it. Jade Cargill is still green as shit. She's still learning. So even though she's got the superstar look, she doesn't have the superstar ability in the ring yet, because her presence is amazing, but her ability just isn't up to snuff yet. So I'm okay with them just letting her cook a little bit longer in the oven and giving us the best version of Jade Cargill when they're ready to go. The heel Profits and Lashley idea sounded great on paper, but I feel the idea is going quite the opposite as WWE intended because they're just too likable to be heels. I know, like the Profits were one of the most likable tag teams. It's gonna be very difficult to turn that upside down and make them unlikable, considering they didn't even make them unlikable, they just made them cool. And then there's Bobby Lashley, who has always been cool, and now Bobby is at this point of his career where we just have so much respect for him because he's just operating at such a high level, even though he's getting up there in his years, getting close to 50. So all of us just love him and respect him because of how good he still is in the ring today. It's an uphill battle. We are not going to dislike the Profits, and we are not going to boo Bobby Lashley. It's not going to happen. WWE should bring back the PLE Cyber Saturday. I like the idea. I mean, today's social media landscape is far, far greater than it was back in 2006, 7, and 8 when they did Cyber Sunday, Taboo Tuesday. It had a couple of different names. But if anything, they were so ahead of their time doing polls online in WWE.com to make the results of the PLE. I think it was a brilliant idea then, and I think it makes even more sense in today's landscape of the WWE. Even if they don't want to make it a PLE, they could totally revolve an episode of SmackDown or Raw with the Cyber Sunday concept. I would love for it to come back. Jimmy and Jay Uso deserve better booking. The real MVPs of the Bloodline storyline, despite being in the main event, they've done nothing but lose in splitting them up. If WWE wants any hype surrounding their match together, they need to raise the Uso stock and fast. Well, that's why the road to WrestleMania is fantastic, because you can absolutely raise somebody's stock quickly enough to have them ready for WrestleMania. In terms of their treatment leading up to this, it's been rough, man. Like, I feel like especially Jimmy has lost a lot of luster. Whenever Roman isn't there, both Jimmy and Solo just feel like the goons of the Bloodline. They just feel like NPCs. They feel special when Roman is there, but without Roman, they don't really do it for me, if I'm being honest with you. And then there's Jay, who is, I think, been treated better than Jimmy, and he's done more than Jimmy, but he also just doesn't do it for me as this like singles main event star. Again, this is still the early beginnings of their singles career, so you know there's bound to be some growing pains. So let's give it time, let's be patient with it, but I'm confident that the WWE can raise their stock enough to generate hype for this match at WrestleMania. I don't think I like returning wrestlers just skyrocketing to the top of the card regardless of name. Like, yeah, it's gonna be good regardless, but it is kind of insulting to the rest of the roster that's been grinding, trying to get to the top just to go back 10 steps. I don't know what to tell you, man. This is just sort of business. Usually, like, if you have a returning star, the fans miss them. And if they miss them, people are going to want to see what they're going to do for the first time. People are going to want to buy their new merch. People are going to want to tune in. Therefore, you get more ratings. So it's just a good business move to do that. And sure, okay, there's been people that have been grinding in the back that feel like maybe their spot is going to be taken away. But we also got to realize that they might not have had that spot had that person not gotten hurt. So tit for tat, right? They got a chance to rise to the limelight, and now it's time for the guy that's returning or girl that's returning to get their limelight back. Because sometimes you can be an LA Knight where Roman leaves, where Cena leaves, and then there's this big vacuum, and LA Knight just rises to the top and stays there, even though your point kind of resonates with the whole LA Knight situation, considering now he's taking a backseat to Randy Orton and AJ Styles. Okay, I mean, it's interesting, but still, it's just business, man. They should let R-Truth beat Gunther for the IC title. This man gets it. This guy, Brendan Hoover, whoever you are, my guy, my dude, my homie, dap me up. Yeah, yeet. Yes, I want to see that. R-Truth, I don't know if we're actually going to see that, but that would be fucking hilarious. All right? Give me truth. Give me more truth in everything. I want truth right here. In fact, I've got him right. Just kidding. I did invite R-Truth here. Okay, that's it. I'm kind of just talking now. Get out of here.